Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to Kleine Zalze, home of a great golf course, home of a great restaurant, and home of some exceptional wine. And by exceptional wine, I mean wine that has seen Kleine Zalze as a producer win, amongst other things, both the Platter and the Trophy Wine Show Producer of the Year, and today has the honour of hosting a rather special occasion. It is the announcement of the top performers in the Prescient, Shiraz, Chenin Blanc and Cape White blend categories, celebrating some exceptional wine made by some really cool producers. And I've got a vested interest in this, not just because the guys at Wine Mag are great friends, but because Christian and Jax very kindly invited me to be, and let me see if I get this just right, the Junior Assistant Deputy Trainee Apprentice Judge for the Shiraz category. Now, I believe that's a very, very auspicious title. So I got to spend the day with a team and get an understanding of not just how the judging process works, but also just how people like Christian Eedes, Ndaba, Dube and Malu, Lambert are able to blindfolded taste this wine and get something special out of it and work out just why it deserves the kind of scores that these wines get. So on today's show, we get to drop in on that process, check out how the judging goes and get a feel for what we see at the end of the day as simply a number or an award, but which has a lot of work beforehand going into it. And then later on in the show, we'll be back here over lunch at Kleine Zalze, and we'll be able to not just taste the wine, but hear from some of the triumphant winemakers and get a sense of why, together with Wine Mag and Prescient, it's just so important to have occasions like this. So that's coming a little later. First up though, let's head into the very heart of, I think it's Salt River, for some tasting and some judging, and my debut in this particular space. So a point of fascination for me in the wine world is the art of judging. How do you work out what medal a wine gets, what score it gets, and why do some people think a wine's extraordinary and others don't? Well, there is a process to it. It's not just a subjective thumbsuck, and today I've been invited into the inner sanctum of the process as a junior assistant trainee reserve substitute judge for Wine Mag's Prescient report with Shiraz, and the man who runs it all, with a palate we all envy enormously, is Christian Eedes. Thank you for welcoming me in and teaching me the secret handshake and having me as part of the crew today for a fascinating space, because I think for most people, they see these scores and they see the awards, they don't really know how it works. So talk us through this process and how collectively you come up with this analysis of different wines.
Okay, Dan, thanks for having me. We use a three-person panel, each judge having some connection to the wine industry and having trained through one way or another to become a judge. And then we taste blind, which is to say labels out of sight, which is really important because a lot of ratings are generated with the label in front of the taster, which obviously leads to some form of bias. So we're tasting blind, and we taste in flights of 20, and each judge scores individually, and then we discuss the flight wine by wine, at which point, based on the discussion, judges can alter their score up or down, and we finally come to a consensus, and it's scored according to the 100-point system, and that's the long and the short of it, I guess.
What about that scoring? Is it right? 2 points, it's got a nice label. 4 points, the cork didn't break. 6 points, I think I could have this for dinner. How do you break down those actual points?
So the 100-point system, which is the industry standard, is also quite controversial. The way we use it is an 88 to 89 points would be roughly equivalent to a bronze medal, which means a wine of merit, more than drinkable. 90 to 92 is silver medal, which is very good, highly collectible, a real feat of winemaking. 93 and above is equivalent to gold medal. And the closer you get to 100, the closer you are to perfection. I personally have score inflation is a real bugbear for me. So we're quite. I try and drive the panel to be conservative rather than profligate with their scoring. And if you've made a 93 plus wine, you've made a really good drink.
In terms of this trio of judges, if we look at today, there's yourself, editor of Wine Mag, and many years of drinking wine around the world. We've then got Ndaba, who's a lovely, engaging, wonderful guy. And then you've got Malu Lambert, who might be an extraordinary wine writer, but is famously argumentative, and I suspect likely to cause a lot of trouble with you today. How do you come to a consensus when you've got people who've often got quite firm opinions about wine?
So it quickly stops being about wine and more about managing different personalities. Malu's really got a heart of gold under all that bravado.
All right, well, we're going to see it all in action. The three judges are coming together. There are 50 different wines to try today, all of them blind. I'm completely intimidated, but also really excited to see how the mechanics of the judging play out. So this is a whole learning experience for me, and it's fascinating to watch the spittoon technique. Now, both Christian and Kenny use the Burgundian technique, very precise, a jet of wine coming out, whereas Malu and Ndaba, the Bordeaux technique, it's a lot slower, a lot smoother. I focus on the Michael Frijon Pretoria technique, where you spit out a little bit, you actually drink the rest of it while no one's watching. Far more effective. All right, so we are one flight down in the Shiraz/Syrah tasting, and already this has been couples therapy between Christian and the new Angela Lloyd, who is one of the judges. Hayley, you're only having a lot of fun there, but it's also, this is tough. I was expecting it to just be, let's drink lots of wine and enjoy it, but there's quite a process to this.
So, Dan, you're used to watching sports, right?
I am.
This is exactly the same. It's just like watching another sport take place, and in fact, sometimes more fatiguing than actual throwing a ball around. It takes mental acuity and palate acuity. So.
And that palate, you've got 50 wines today, and for most people, they're not going to taste that different. It's 50 examples of the same cultivar. But just listening to you guys, you're picking up such minute detail on every single one.
Again, with the sports analogy, our arm is in. I mean, Christian's been tasting the entire week. We all taste regularly. It's a sport. It's a blood sport.
When you approach it, Christian was talking earlier about score inflation and wanting to be conservative, but by the same token, you've got the ability, if you give somebody a great mark, the chance to send their wine stratospheric and it hits the wine headlines. How do you balance that?
Well, what I love about tasting for Wine Mag is that it's a collegiate atmosphere. So we score, but then we can also discuss, because we're all human, we all miss things. I missed a wine in the first flight, for example. Christian missed the wine in the next flight, for example. And we get to discuss and go, what did you like about that? What didn't you like about that? And not only do we learn from each other, but we give the producers the best possible chance.
I also noticed you guys were drinking wines in different orders. Was there a reason to that?
Yes, a few different reasons. Your first wine, you kind of hedge your bets with. And as you go through the flight, you hit your kind of stream with it. So sometimes maybe the first couple of wines you weren't as generous as you could have been. Also, palate fatigue plays a role. So as you get to your 20th wine, maybe you're not being as generous as you could be at that point either. So it makes a fair playing ground.
There have been one or two moments where the conversation got a little more heated as you discussed and debated. Is that fairly standard, especially between you and Christian?
Yes. What other answer do you need?
All right, and we're looking at Shiraz and Syrah here, just in closing, a snapshot of what you've tasted so far. A reasonable day in the office?
A great day in the office. But I think we have to be conservative when we talk about Syrah, because it's been long hailed as the new great grape of South Africa. But I think the true story is a little bit more complex, especially if you zero in viticulturally. It's a grape that actually doesn't do well in a lot of terroirs. The terroirs it does do well in are more and more shown to be cooler. Elam, Polka Dry Hills, and as such. So I think that we need to be careful in saying, yes, Shiraz is the new Chenin, where Chenin does do really well in a lot of terroirs. Syrah is not actually the same thing. And I think what we're seeing, the wines that are coming out and the wines that we enjoy, show their sense of place. And that sense of place disappears after 14 or 14.5% alcohol. And that's what we've seen today.
There we go, summing up our Shiraz so far. The results are not that far away. Last little wine to try, and this is just great fun, isn't it? So this is slightly awkward, and I don't want to say it too loud, but I think Christian's copying my notes. Yeah. So we're well into today's tasting, and Ndaba, if I look at all of this wine that you guys have had, I'm trying to work out how 30, 40, 50 glasses of wine in, first of all, you're still standing, but also you're still able to taste and compare. How do you manage to keep the palate able to do justice to wine number 45 as much as you did wines in the first 5 or 10?
It takes a lot of training most of the time, as well as just a mindset. Like Christian highlighted, there has been courses that we've done, but the majority of the time it's basically just continuously doing the tastings and just being intentional about it.
When you line these up, for me this felt like a school exam as I'm writing it down, hoping I get it right. You guys are obviously got all this experience, you've been doing it for so long, but is there ever that nagging suspicion in the back that maybe this is a really good wine and I've got it wrong, or are you purely focused on I've got to back my own feel on this?
Naturally, yes, it's there. However, because it's a team, it's a panel, so you have to trust your instinct. I think judging is one of those loneliest places, but it's also good because when you actually stand out at the end, you realize actually you got something to give.
In terms of those three people, the discussion you have, there's got to be a give and take. How easy is it to relinquish a position? You've decided this is definitely an 85 and Christian's adamant it's 103. How do you find that middle ground? How do you accept when to say no and when to say yes?
What I love about the panel over the years and just being associated with it is the openness of engagement. So in that sense, you stand to actually gain by fighting for the ones that you believe in. However, the big part of it is you have to actually bring out real stuff about the wine that actually gives it the score. So the scores actually are based on certain elements that really should up to make it a best performing wine for that category.
A big part of being let into your holy sanctum of judging is to allow people to understand how the process works. But what else do you think people can learn from how you guys approach wine on a day like this in terms of a better understanding and from there a better appreciation of the wine we drink day to day?
I think love and passion for wine is critical when you do these things, because majority of the time you get so tired, but based on the fact that you love it, it becomes natural and part of you.
So that's a wrap for day one. Half of the judging is done, even more to come tomorrow. It is the Prescient Shiraz report with Wine Mag, and all of the results will be out from the 16th of May. So if you want to know how all of today translates into actual numbers and points and awards, you'll have to wait until then. It's been a fascinating process. Thanks to Erica for looking after us all the way through the day. And our judges, the quiet voice of reason in Kenny, along with Ndaba, Malu and Christian. I've learned a whole heap. Hopefully I'll get invited back again because it really has been enormously good fun. So that was my first experience doing some judging. It was a very intimidating day. These are people who do this day in, day out, and their ability to pick up a glass of wine and go, that winemaker was left-handed. This was wine where grapes picked on a Tuesday. It's the kind of detail that is well beyond me, the detail I'm having to learn a bit more as my wine journey continues. And it's a journey that's brought me today to Kleine Zalze. And I've been out here many times, often to play golf. It's got an exquisite golf course. It also has a restaurant that's changed names over the years. Some of you may remember the old days of Terroir. Although the names have changed, it's still a home to terrific food, and I've experienced that already today. And it's also home to some very familiar wine. And if you look at the labels, you'll see labels we've had on Dan Really Likes Wine on a number of occasions. Wines that have popped up not just for us on the show, but also popped up as award-winning wines. And you can see behind all of these 5-star platter awards amongst the many celebrations of an estate that, yes, it's big, yes, they make volume, but they haven't sacrificed quality in terms of building up a brand that sits on a big scale. And that's a challenge that a lot of wine brands have. How do we scale up? How do we make loads of wine and not compromise on quality? And I think Kleine Zalze have done that as well as any, and not just with the still wine, but also with the bubbles. And Kleine Zalze bubbles are also wines that people know particularly well, delivering some of the finest Cap Classique that Stellenbosch has. But then they do something that you might not know quite so well, and that is this here. Now, every winemaker at heart has got some maverick DNA. Yes, they make the standard varietals that sell well and that people recognize, but they've all got that itch they want to scratch. They want to create something that's different, that's left of center, that's way out there. And that brings us to Project Z. Now, these are wines that change pretty much every vintage, depending on what they decide is going to go into this particular space. They're wines with a very eye-catching set of labels, and some of them you'll know fairly well. For instance, there's a Chenin Blanc. Oh, that's fairly straight and down the narrow, but then you also get a Riesling Verdelho blend. Now, surely that's just a winemaker who's had too much to drink one night in the cellar and decided this is a good idea. Well, these Project Z wines, although they haven't been going for a huge amount of time, have already got a real cult following, and they tend to sell out rather quickly. Not only that, but they also tend to catch the eye of judges, which is why we find some of these wines popping up in the Prescient Shiraz report with WineMag.
The reason we bunch Chenin and Shiraz together is I think they are respectively our two strongest categories, Chenin white, red, Syrah red. The super exciting thing about South African wine in the modern era is we just seem to be on this eternally upwards improvement curve, and it doesn't seem to ever plateau out. I mean, Chenin is a national treasure. It's our most widely planted variety, and the wines just seem to get better and better. Syrah, have to be honest. There were some very high peaks, but some quite low troughs as well. It does seem to be quite site specific. I mean, you could say that about any variety, but increasingly it looks like Syrah does well in cooler climate areas. When it's not planted in the ideal circumstances, it makes for pretty ordinary generic red. But I suppose it goes towards the point that we, as an industry, still finding our way. It's terrific to see Wildeburg, which was our 2022 Winery of the Year, coming through again. Wildeburg was fairly unknown before last year, and here they are again. So, I mean, are they a surprise? No, they aren't. But they're brave enough to stick their wines into blind tastings, and they're coming out as tops. So good luck to them.
We started in 2018. We set out and said, listen, we just want to make wines that we can give our friends and enjoy with our friends and be true to what we really believe in. And I think a big thank to WineMag and Prescient for recognizing the style that we wanted to produce. So it's always nice to get a golden star on your forehead, and we will always be doing what we're doing and what we believe in, and but the accolades is always nice. Tea Leaf actually started in 2015, so then it was originally from Pickeniers Kloof, obviously renowned for rooibos tea. And we've got a very funky marketing manager called Robin from Manchester. And when he saw the vineyards with all the tea plantations next to it, he started with Tea Leaf. So 2015 was actually 100% Chenin. And till today, the blend is not the same ever since. So it's just a brew, as we call it. We taste through the barrels and what we think represent Tea Leaf, which is I would say slightly more voluptuous, if that's the word, slightly more muscular towards our other wines. So yeah, it's been a success. We've worked, and it also gives us chance to work with different varieties like Marsanne, Grenache Gris. We actually put in a little bit of orange wine back in the days. It's just to produce the best white blend, Cape White blend that we can each year, and in that style.
Yeah, so it's really great to be involved. We've been involved for a number of years. We like to pair our love for investments, investment fund platforms, and wine. We just feel the combination really works. A lot of our clients enjoy it, and we enjoy it. With Wine Mag last year, actually hosted a client event in London. We took with the best of the Wine Mag Prescient wines. People are going crazy for it. It really is something that showcases the quality, and I'm glad it's going out there and people are acknowledging and seeing it.
It's always an honor. You know, it's wonderful to get recognition for hard work, and to be part of a top 10 competition is always a great feeling. So Chenin Blanc is a focus for us as well. It's part of our core business, and this specific wine is heritage vineyards, so it's certified heritage vineyards, which is old bush vines. They are older than 40 years. These specific wines, they are in the False Bay region, planted on very granitic soil. So I've mentioned this before, but they almost look like a beach, you know. But it's all 100% granite, and those soils bring a wonderful texture to wines. So this wine was fermented in older oak barrels, but also portions of amphora and concrete egg. So concrete eggs that we purchase from a local producer in South Africa, and the amphoras we import from Italy. And yeah, a wonderful textured wine. Very linear, very elegant on the palate, with a lot of hints of where the site specific is. You know, very much mineral finish at the end.
And so that wraps up a pretty insightful, I think, look at exactly how the judging process works. From earlier on in the show, the chance to sit with the judges and see how they juggle the different interpretations of wine. I love the fact that you've got guys who know so much about wine, and yet in the same room can taste exactly the same wine on exactly the same day, and one of them thinks it's 95 points and one of them thinks it's 88, which in wine terms is a chasm, and yet come together to find a middle ground and hand out the awards, which a little later on today we saw in the company of some terrific winemakers. This is not a space where you're going to find the Ibn Sadis and like. They don't need to enter these competitions, just as a Romani Conti or a Petrus doesn't need to enter same in Europe. But what this does do, and I think Christian Eedes put it perfectly, it's almost a talent spotting competition. This is where we're seeing so many new wines come through, but also some of the more established ones, and that combination of people like Kleine Zalze, along with Wildeberg, just coming through, Mellish today, another who've only been going for 2 or 3 vintages. It's a real look at not just what is now, but what is to come in terms of the quality of South African wine. It was a really exciting day, of a very intimidating one, being part of that judging process. Thank you to Christian Jackson, the Wine Mag team, for including me there. And then today with Prescient, celebrating the guys who performed and who showcased just how well South African wine is doing, and how the quality, as Christian says, is just getting better and better and better. Plus, I got to spend the day at Kleine Zalze, not on the golf course, sadly, I'm sure it'll happen soon, but enjoying a terrific meal at a wonderful restaurant and accompanying it with some superb South African wine that just continues to show how well we are doing. That does it for this week. Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Thank you for joining us. I'm off to finish off some award-winning wine. I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.